in this very short gospel of only 3 verses, which, by the way, is only 2 complete sentences, Jesus says the word welcome 5 times. Now, you don't have to be a Bible scholar to know that the focus of the gospel today is welcome. And so that's what I'd like to preach on today. Now, it's interesting to note that some Bible scholars have interpreted the Greek word for welcome as receive. And I think in that Bible translation, it was welcome. Whereas for me, welcome can be as simple as a greeting. But the word receive denotes gift. It denotes sharing and experiencing. And in English, we can say that we welcome someone. We could also say we receive someone. I think it's good to keep in mind this idea of receiving when we think about welcome. Today, I'd like to hear your experience of welcome, or at least invite you to think about welcome. I'd also like to touch on 3 points about welcome. Number 1, I'd like to share my experience of welcome in this congregation. Don't worry, it's not a bad critique at all. Second, I'd like to suggest some practical techniques. And third, I'd like to share the secret of extending welcome. To start, I think you all do welcome very, very well. Even if you're a small community that visitors might consider to be very tight-knit and therefore impenetrable, you make sure the visitor is welcomed. And you do it in so many different ways. You show welcome by having an inviting building and grounds that are accessible and easy to navigate. You show welcome by having a greeter at the door, being attentive to the needs of visitors, and after the service, many of you go out of your way to chat with them. You show welcome by making worship accessible to many visitors with our bulletin, by having worship available on Zoom. You show welcome by modeling belonging, by praying for one another and showing concern for each other. You show welcome by extending invitations to visitors to other events. You show welcome by reaching out to church members and non-church members. And besides the Sunday worship, you show welcome by having a well-designed website, making it easy for users to navigate. You show welcome to groups who wish to use our space. I'm sure you can think of other ways that I didn't mention that you show welcome. So good for you. Big pat on the back. But beyond that, I think the Moravian Church has shown welcome to many cultures. It has encountered the Inuit, indigenous peoples, Jamaicans, and many others. As well, it has shown welcome to women who seek ordination. You've been doing that for generations, as well as LGBT folks. I would like to say that the theology of the Moravian Church is inherently welcoming, since it is so definitively ecumenical. Now, researchers of church behavior note that people come and go to churches for many, many reasons. And one of the reasons is that the church's understanding of God and the human person also aligns with their own. I think Moravian theology is very acceptable to many people, even with those with no experience of church. An example of that is how Moravians understand the Bible. While the Bible is an important source for Christian wisdom for us, it is not the only source of wisdom. And I think because of that, Moravians don't get too stuck in the weeds when it comes to discerning God's path for us. I think many people would find that very appealing and perhaps more inviting than other theologies of the Bible. Next, I'd like to turn to strategies for welcoming. If you Google strategies for how to be a welcoming church, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of lists. I found one with this funny title, The 10 Commandments of Being a Welcoming Church. Now, reading through all these lists, as I did, you'd be glad to note that you do almost all of them, all the time. So good for you. You'll also find some strategies you might want to employ, such as when you're visiting and chatting with each other, to stand in a U shape rather than an O shape. That way, a visitor has an opportunity to join your chit-chatting, which is, I think, a good strategy. Another strategy is expressing to a visitor that you hope to see them again. As it turns out, that's important. And inviting them to other events is also a good strategy. Besides that, I'm not going to suggest any more. What I will do is invite you to reflect on what makes you feel welcomed to a church, to this church. You can use that as your baseline for how you're going to extend welcome to others. Now, I visited hundreds of churches in my lifetime. When I'm on vacation, my partner and I make it a priority to visit as many churches as possible for worship, and not just Catholic ones, but all sorts. Besides experiencing different worship experiences and different communities, I also like to test how welcome I feel and what churches do differently to welcome visitors. I can say there isn't too much that's new or innovative, and there isn't really anything I'd suggest to a small congregation such as ours. For me, though, I have 6 expectations for what I find to be a welcoming church. First, I do enjoy being greeted at the entranceway. Second, it's nice to be greeted by someone when I sit down, maybe someone sitting around me. And I've been to churches where there was none of that, and it's not a pleasant experience. But I do feel welcomed just in those 2 simple ways. Third, it's nice to be greeted by the pastor or some greeter during the worship service. Fourth, I like to be noticed one time after the service. Doesn't have to be the pastor, could be someone else. But I do appreciate it when the pastor or a church leader goes out of their way to greet me. And finally, if there's a social event following the service, it's nice to be invited to that too, even if I don't plan on attending. Now that's just me. Maybe you'd find all of that too stifling. Maybe you're an introvert and that's just too terrifying. Or maybe that's not enough welcome for you. Maybe you want more engagement. Everyone is different and has different expectations. And that's also good to be aware of too. So when we have folks come to visit us, maybe they're more of an introvert, or maybe they're an extrovert. Either way, show welcome how you'd like to show welcome. Another source of inspiration when it comes to welcome is how we welcome others to our homes, or how we feel welcome in others' homes. One of the great images of heaven is that of our eternal home. And so our churches and homes can be a foretaste, a glimpse into that heavenly eternal home. Personally, I always like being offered a drink or even food when I visit someone's home. The other day when I was dropping off the car back at Doug's and Tamara's, they offered me food. How wonderful. I couldn't stay though, but even that gesture was very wonderful. I'm not sure if it's a cultural thing, but in Filipino culture, among the first greetings you'll hear is, "Have you eaten?" So after "hello, welcome," it's "have you eaten?" As if, you're hungry all the time. I think this notion also reflects our Christian idea of heaven as not only our eternal home, but heaven as a banquet feast. In my work in parish life, I've encountered folks who come to church hungry. I know this because they will simply ask me, "Do you have food?" when they come through the doors. I can only imagine how many others come not having had a good meal. Now, how about you? What makes for a good welcome? What's your experience of welcome? Would anyone like to share? All right. I invite you to just hold that to heart, how you feel welcome, and I invite you to, over the weeks and months, to consider that as a way that you might show others welcome. Now, the fun part, the secret of welcome. Here's the secret. We are more apt to welcome others if we have experienced belonging ourselves. I know it's not really a mind-blowing thing. It's just a simple piece of wisdom. You might recall 2 weeks ago, I talked about psychological isolation. I mentioned how psychologists note that the most terrifying and destructive feeling that a human person can experience is psychological isolation. That type of isolation is the feeling of being locked out of any possibility of human connection and of being powerless to change the situation. And in its extreme form, psychological isolation can lead to a sense of hopelessness and desperation. People in this state can do anything, will do anything to escape this combination from addiction, self-injuring, eating disorders, bullying, violence, and suicide. As people of faith, we trust that God is with us in so many ways. God is with us in our community. God is with us in the Word, Jesus Christ. God is with us in prayer. And so if we trust, if we have faith, then we are never alone. Jesus saves us from this utterly destructive feeling of isolation. So while we may feel welcome and belonging in community, it really is the deeper sense of belonging to God that roots us. We do so much to fit in to communities. We do so much to belong. Oftentimes, this clashes with our need to be different and unique. Oftentimes, we compromise who we are to belong. And this can result in us fitting in, but not actually belonging. We mold ourselves to communities instead of standing for our authentic self. Sadly, this doesn't create real connection. In fact, this can end up making us feel lonelier with people than we would if we had stayed our true selves. So, true belonging enables us to be ourselves without having to lose ourselves in community. And actually, this is a good point regarding our full communion. Being in full communion with our Anglican and Lutheran siblings doesn't mean we're going to lose who we are. In fact, we become truly who we are when we're in community and feel belonging with each other. Now, I also think of many of the people who have left church. They have left for many reasons. I think one of the reasons is that they are so well interconnected with the community that the interconnection with God wasn't as strong. Let me say that one more time. So they were so connected with the community that really their connection with God wasn't entirely there. And in some ways, community connection was their connection to God, when really it's only one part of that connection we are called to. We need both. Another way to think about this is using the analogy of a forest. Imagine yourself a tree in this forest. As Christians, our roots are interconnected with our other Christian siblings, not only in this faith community, but others. What's more, our roots are growing amidst decaying remains of other great trees that once lived, our Christian ancestors. Our roots are also nurtured new shoots of new growth. But our interconnectedness isn't enough. God provides each of us everything we need to thrive. The soil, the minerals that our roots are in, the water, other living creatures, bacteria and fungus, oxygen and sun. We can easily observe that every tree on the planet is unique. Every tree expresses itself differently based on its context, its soil. Even trees growing right next to each other are different. And so we, each of us, need a sense of that inner, deeper rootedness in God in all things than just our interconnectedness with each other. We need both. And here's another secret. The interconnectedness and rootedness we have in God is found in our deepest selves. As Brené Brown puts it, true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. Let me read that one more time. True belonging only happens when we present our authentic selves, our imperfect selves, to the world. Our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. And when we have a sense of that true belonging, we can't help but wish it upon others. So, in a way, you're already living out the secret of welcome. You know that you extend welcome because you experience belonging yourself with God. How beautiful. I believe my welcome in this community is rooted in that fact. Each and every one of you is rooted yourselves in God, and you thrive because of your interconnectedness with each other. May God continue to nourish you so you may extend welcome and receive that welcome too. I invite you into a moment of silence, listening to the Spirit stirring in your minds and hearts. Let us pray. God who receives us and who we receive, God who welcomes us and we welcome, come and dwell in our hearts. Love us into our fullest being. Send your Spirit so we may welcome others in your name and see your face, so that they too may be rooted in you and with us. We make this prayer in the name of Christ, who calls us to welcome all. Amen.